I'm getting a little bit of backlash about the handgun ban, and that was where I said, like, is this something I want to dive? Because I said I wasn't thinking about it. It's, are we seeing more, violent crimes in North Bay? Are we seeing more with weapon related, and that could be gun, it could be anything, right? Yeah, absolutely, we're seeing that. It was in, we saw that in the media, that there's a rise, right? But when you look at it, you can't just look at the handgun ban in isolation, because it's one piece. It's supporting the police so that they have proper search and seizure training. It's making sure that they have the proper supports to do whatever their job is in its entirety. But then you have to look at supporting the children and making sure that they stay in a healthy environment, right?
Well, the handgun ban talk is ridiculous, because most of the guns that the criminals are using are not registered. They're not legal guns. They're getting them from the States. I think they just found somebody was flying over duffel bags of guns with one of those drones from the border.
But that's when I was trying to look it up, because I'm like, okay, how do I feel about this, right? They're announcing it. I'm like, okay, one thing I read says 75%, and then a report 2 years later says we're at 50% domestic, because people are now buying them legally and selling them on the black market because they're trying to get money, because it pays well to sell it on the black market. So I'm like, but this is me doing my own research. I don't have all the people at my own hands, but I think it was the same researcher that had said the same thing 2 years before, about 75%. Then they went to 50% and started talking about how there are more legal guns now being used. And if you look at, was it Scarborough? A few of the recent incidents down south were with legally purchased handguns. But that's what I'm saying. But is there an issue with the illegal handguns? Absolutely. Is there an issue probably with legal handguns? Yes. Does that mean every person that owns a handgun is a bad person and is going to go shoot somebody? No. But do we have to start looking at it in a bigger picture? But this is where I was like, this is one that I was like, I'm not overly, I've got other things that I'm more passionate about, but is this one where I'm going to stand up in front of the party and say, well, I don't agree with this one? And
the details, like you're saying, really don't float in the political water, because it's a wedge issue that reduces your ability to get elected. Mm-hmm. Well, it's just not smart politics necessarily. That's not something I'd want to put on a platform, because I don't really believe it's going to make an impact.
But Southern Ontario, they're seeing more and more shootings, right? Niagara Falls, Scarborough, and there was a shooting Kitchener, right around the corner from my mother-in-law's apartment building. And I remember being like, oh my God, like, look how close that was to where she lives, and isn't this a fairly decent neighborhood? And I'm like, there's more and more gun violence happening. We know that, but then again, I don't have the reports and the ability to get all that information, because I'm not a city member. But if I was and something was about to pass, you know darn well that I'm going to try to make sure that I know my stats and understand. But it also can't be done in isolation. You can't just think that this is going to solve the problem. And the NDP they have their ideas of how to fix it. The PCs have their ideas. Combine all this stuff, but figure it out, because we are seeing more gun violence across the province. Whether we see it here in Nipissing, not so much, but when the first time it happens, the first time we see somebody shooting, you don't think somebody's not going to talk about that or saying, what do we need to do? And sometimes the first thing people do think about is that big thing, saying like, this is what we need. And meanwhile, you're like, well, it really isn't that. It really is more like this. But right, a lot of it is politics. What's politically appealing to deal with an issue? And is it the right thing, or is it just so? But that's where I don't have the stats, and it's a
well, the way I look at it, things can be fixed without bans. A legal gun owner, a legal purchase of a handgun, there's very restricted use and ability for that type of thing. If it's a matter of people legally buying them and selling them, then there's a way to fix that. Maybe there needs to be an annual check of your gun still in your hands, kind of thing. Where is that gun? You're responsible for that serial number, so you prove where it is. And
that's a great idea. Yeah, but that's what I mean. But in my mind, it sounds like a great idea. But again, that's not an area that I'm an expert in, right? So that's where I'm like, it would be something like, somebody brings up a topic I'm not familiar with. I rely on people that are more experts. But I'm like, sounds like a great idea what you just said.
Well, it may not be the best.
No, but that's what I mean. But it sounds good.
It's an idea that gets around the fact that you're restricting people's rights to enjoy hobbies and do what they want to do, which is
But then again, why do you need your own handgun? I get it's a hobby or whatever, but I don't. For me, like that's my question, right? Because it's not my. But again,
it's a lifestyle thing. So you can't make choices for other people's lifestyles.
But for something that could harm somebody else, this is where you and like these are the things that go in my head all the time, right?
I know,
like,
but then you got crossbows, you got a hammer.
Exactly, right?
Like if a violent person wants to commit a crime, they're going to pick up a piece of steel and hit someone over the head with it.
But you see how so this is the stuff that plays in my head, and having these conversations with people, I love having them because it's just like I like to be that. I'll play like devil's advocate because I'm like I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing for the right reasons. So I'm going to ask you questions, and like I'll go to Al McDonald all the time, and he'll say. He says, I don't want to ask you because I know you're just going to say, I said, you won't change your mind. I said, you didn't change my mind though. I said, you didn't have a pitch strong enough to change my mind. And I said, because I ask him all the questions and I'm tiring sometimes with the number of questions I ask. But it's because I'm trying to get myself there to say, am I on the right path or is that person actually right? So having those dialogues, like where we just talked, I'm like, I don't know, those are some pretty good pieces of information.
Could happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just... it's hard to solve that solution, but I know whenever it's brought up in the last 30 years that I've been paying attention, it becomes a wedge issue, and it solidifies the bases, and all of a sudden the more important issues, even if there's rise in crime, and then there's rise in gun violence and whatnot, that's not the most important thing going on right now because what leads to the crime is what
is when you start
is the problem, right?
Early education and early,